All right, y'all. I have figured out how to Jimmy rig a setup for making videos here without my actual PC. I'm using my laptop. The audio is coming from this headset microphone, so it's not going to be as good as normal, but I do have my normal face cam. Hopefully the setup here is good enough for the next couple days while I have no PC, because for those of y'all who know about my 2K channel, it got hacked. My computer has a virus on it. Getting it professionally cleaned and removed, making sure that they can identify the virus properly and get my PC back to where it needs to be. So in the meantime, this is what we got. I didn't think I was going to be able to upload any videos at all, but I figured out some way to do a setup. So I'm going to try to get a couple more videos out today after this one. And then I'll get y'all 3-4 videos at least tomorrow, maybe even more than that, breaking down all the different moves at the trade deadline and just talking about all the things that are changing in the NBA. So hopefully, despite the fact we've missed some of these trades, we're going to catch up a little bit over the next day or two and get right back on track making this NBA content. So really appreciate y'all for sticking with me and supporting. And we're going to start with the Jimmy Butler trade. Definitely one of the biggest moves of the deadline. The Miami Heat trade Jimmy Butler to the Golden State Warriors for Andrew Wiggins and a couple other pieces. Kyle Anderson remains with the Heat for the time being. There was a bunch of other assets and moves and things involved in this trade. Dennis Schroeder winds up going to Utah, but now he's going to Detroit. Kyle Anderson was going to go to Toronto, but that wound up not working out. So now he's staying with the Heat for the time being. Josh Richardson was going to go from the Heat to somewhere. I don't even remember where Josh Richardson wound up getting moved to. Point being, a lot of this stuff is chaos. I think he and Lindy Waters wound up going to the Pistons. So a lot of moving parts here. The Jazz were involved somehow as well. I know they got Schroeder and they're moving him to the Pistons. It's a little bit of a chaotic move, but the important parts of this move are the fact that basically the Heat traded Jimmy Butler for Wiggins and a first-round pick are the main assets, and Kyle Anderson as well. It is a protected pick. Now, here's the honest truth. I'm not sure this is a good deal for Miami or Golden State, especially considering the fact that right after this deal got announced, it was also announced that Jimmy Butler is waiving his player option for next season in order to re-sign a 2-year extension with the Warriors worth $121 million. So that means that after this year, he'll be making about $60 million a year for the next 2 years in Golden State. This is the big move that they kind of felt like they had to make to try to give Steph one more opportunity to compete with a co-star. The problem is, I'm not sure Jimmy Butler's ego fits. I'm not sure Jimmy Butler's play style fits. I'm not convinced this is an elite fit for the Warriors, and they have certainly hamstrung their flexibility both asset-wise and financially with this move and the extension for Jimmy Butler. So for the Heat, for the Warriors, I'm concerned about this producing winning basketball. For the Heat, I'm just disappointed that this is the entire return that they got, because if they had traded Jimmy Butler 6 months ago, the return would have been multiple picks and a couple of assets. Whereas now you get a protected pick and Andrew Wiggins, who, while a good player, isn't a game-changing asset for the Heat at all and doesn't raise their ceiling significantly or anything like that for a team that I think still does have designs on contention. So the only person who really wins in this trade is Jimmy Butler. He gets out of Miami, and he gets $120 million over the next 2 years after this season. Really worked out great for him. If nothing else, very, very successful deal for Jimmy Butler. He won. I mean, he absolutely won at the end of the day. Didn't wind up in Phoenix, which I know is kind of what he wanted ideally, but outside of that, this is a very successful trade for Jimmy. Now, here's the thing. Let's start with the Warriors side of things. The Warriors roster now looks something like this. You have a starting lineup that's going to be something along the lines of Steph. I'm really not sure who at the 2, Jimmy at the 3, Kuminga at the 4, Draymond at the 5. Maybe they continue starting Trace Jackson Davis at the 5. And then off the bench, you have guys like, I would say one of Hilder Podziemski's probably going to start, although Podziemski has struggled so much this year that he's really fallen, I think, off the map and slid down in a lot of people's minds, including the Warriors, for sure. And you got other bench pieces like a Kevon Looney, like a Moses Moody, like Gary Payton, who has shot horribly for most of the season, Guy Santos, Quentin Post, guys like that. You just look at this roster, though, I'm just not sure, number one, of the fit spacing-wise. Outside of Steph and I guess Buddy Hield, you're looking at Jimmy, who's not a great shooter, Draymond, who's not a great shooter, and Trace Jackson Davis, Kevon Looney, total non-shooters. Quentin Post is a real shooting big, and I think he's going to have a role on this team. And then Moses Moody's a decent shooter. Kuminga's not much of a shooter. They didn't move him. They still have to extend him in the offseason in order to get value out of him. And he's never felt like he fits right. Steve Kerr has never loved Jonathan Kuminga. Like, this is just a team that feels like they're going to have a lot of questions and not a lot of answers. Spacing's going to be a concern. Defensively, they should be good, but I still don't think they have the elite level bigs to hang with the best bigs in the West. And outside of Jimmy, they don't have that elite level guard defender as well, outside of maybe a guy like Gary Payton, who is hard to play in a playoff series because of his inability to shoot the ball. You're going to be requiring or relying more than ever, I feel like, on some of these younger dudes to step up with no Andrew Wiggins. Look, I still think Jimmy's a good basketball player. A couple years ago, he was a top 10 player in the league. I mean, he legitimately was. I had him top 10 in the world when they made that run to the finals in 2023. And he's not that far removed to it. And obviously, people talk about playoff Jimmy Butler, and it's been a real thing in the past. I would not be shocked to see him come in with a fire lit under his ass, basically, and play inspired basketball for a while. My concern is, number one, I don't know if they have the spacing to contend. Number two, I'm not sure they have the big men to contend. And number three, I don't know if the egos of Jimmy Butler and Draymond Green are going to coexist well together. That is a concern as well. The whole question mark of just Jimmy, Draymond, Kuminga, playing all three of those dudes together is going to be weird because it's going to be hard to play a center if you have those three dudes on the court at the same time. So is that a Draymond small ball lineup? Okay. It's an interesting lineup, and I don't think it's a terrible lineup because you have some switchable, high-effort, versatile defenders in Jimmy, Draymond, and Kuminga. I don't mind the lineup. I don't think they have that. I guess Jimmy's your secondary scorer, but as much as Dennis Schroeder wasn't great in Golden State, they now don't have that secondary ball handler that they've kind of traded for Schroeder to add. And I mean, losing DeAnthony Melton for injury literally feels like it's been one of those things that has had a massive effect on this Warriors season because he's the type of player that they needed, and he's the type of player that they still don't have. A high-effort, high-level 3-and-D wing, and ideally Podziemski's that, but he's not a good defender. He hasn't shot the ball well this season, or he's not a great defender. He hasn't shot the ball well this season, and his ego, he's another guy who just seems like fit-wise, it's not great. You know what I'm saying? There's a lot about this Warriors team that I just don't love, even post-trade, and maybe I'll be wrong. Maybe things will mesh more cohesively. Maybe they'll be able to add somebody who's a contributor off the buyout market, but I just don't think the moves that they made around this deadline, I feel like they were more based in panic and desperation than they were in logic and long-term progress, I guess. This is mortgaging the long-term for a short-term that still doesn't feel like it's all that great. And realistically, the Heat, they didn't really gain that much either. I mean, they got a contributor in Andrew Wiggins, who's got a couple more years on his contract after this year and is a real good player. I do think a team of Tyler Hero, I guess Terry Rozier, whoever else you have at the guard, Andrew Wiggins, Bam Adebayo, and Kel'el Ware is a real team. That's a good squad. Kel'el Ware's been great. I think that's a legitimate team. I really liked the addition of Davion Mitchell as well as a high-effort dog bench point guard type of guy on the defensive end of the court. Certainly fits the Heat culture. Even Kyle Anderson, who's expected to be rerouted, does feel like another guy who could be a real contributor on this team. I don't mind the deal. What I mind for the Heat is the fact that this should have happened months ago. And they would have gotten more if this had happened months ago. They waited too long, and they played hardball with Jimmy too much. And in all honesty, it just didn't work out. It cost him value, and instead you get a protected first-round pick, and that's it. You do not get the assets that you were expecting to get for Jimmy. And I think playing hardball lost them value at the end of the day. Is basically what I'll say. I think a couple months ago you could have gotten Wiggins, Kuminga, and a couple picks. Now you get basically just Wiggins and a protected pick. Like, in all honesty, this is a classic case of they waited too long to trade a guy and his value dropped. It's the honest truth. And I mean, you can hate on Jimmy all you want for the way that he handled things, and I think there is a real validity to that. But I don't think the Heat helped themselves by burning some of the bridges that they did, and I do think this is going to have some ramifications on that team as well, because they're not a real contender. They're a decent team, but I'm not sure what the path for them towards real contention it is. Maybe it's just hoping that Kel'el Ware continues to make the jump that he's been making and turns into a borderline all-star caliber player here in a couple of years, which I think is a real possibility. But it's going to be fascinating to see how both of these teams are affected by this trade and how the rest of the season and really the next couple of years go for each of these teams, especially Golden State, because this could be a situation where maybe they're feisty and competitive this year, but then they still lose in the playoffs and things go downhill over the next couple of years and it winds up being a waste. So I respect them for trying for Steph. I just don't think this was the place to do it, but I think they kind of ran out of options and this was all they had. So that's going to do it for the video. I hope y'all did enjoy. If you did, make sure you hit that like button, leave a comment, and subscribe. I'll be back with more NBA content very, very soon, and I appreciate y'all. Peace.